Come on, you could run a sector. 2 sectors. A dozen even.
What's up, lore masters? I recently did a live stream discussing this topic, but wanted to provide an analysis and do a bit more in-depth research via a video. I'm going to be going over a recurring theme that I've seen in discussions about Star Trek Discovery, at least Season 3. The problem mainly that's being discussed is with the dilithium and it going inert and thus becoming a nuclear bomb. This results in the destruction of quite a bit.
Then came the burn. No one knows how or why it happened, but in an instant, all dilithium went inert. Any ship with an active warp core detonated.
Warp drive, via the warp core being the most utilized form of transportation in the Alpha and Beta quadrants, makes this a death sentence for countless thousands, if not millions. So there are a few things to discuss here. First, people seem to have an issue with the dilithium becoming inert and basically being turned into a bomb. I honestly don't see anything in previous Star Trek, legacy or otherwise, that makes this out of the realm of possibility. This is no more magical than the self-cloaking minefield found in Deep Space Nine during the Dominion War. In fact, it may make more sense depending on how they explain it. It is a drastic move to be sure, drastic writing, but it's not crazy. Remember, they also had the Omega particle in Voyager, and not a lot of people had an issue with that. Additionally, people are confused about the events, about what happened. This is likely due to them hearing about it and not watching the actual series, or just listening to YouTube commentators that aren't appropriately giving the full picture. To be concise, it was only active warp drives that exploded. This means that any ship that had its warp drive offline was fine. This also includes, but is not limited to, star bases, which are unlikely to be using warp drives. Well, most of them anyway. Also, while warp drive has now shown to be dangerous, like stupid dangerous, it is also still the best form of travel that the Alpha and Beta quadrant species have, as far as we know at least. While the Federation had time travel and likely was working on using quantum slipstream and transwarp, from everything that we can gather, conventional use of dilithium was still the main go-to. So when something like near 70 to 80% of the Federation's fleet is gone in an instant, and this isn't just Starfleet, this is all the civilians as well, the ability to modify ships for quantum slipstream, or even continue that research if it's not perfected, would become near impossible. Pirates and organizations of malcontent instantly begin to monopolize on the tragedy.
The thing is, you got no authority here. Whereas the burn was the best thing that ever happened to me. All that matters now is dilithium.
Starfleet does end overnight. The remnants of both the Federation and Starfleet begin to simply start fighting for their own survival.
We have been in triage for a long time.
In fact, to protect those they care about, they have to become a mobile fleet. They can't even stay at a single planet. So Starfleet probably wouldn't be able to rebound from this hit easily, if at all. Additionally, any time ships that they had, like that of the 29th century USS Relativity, would have been decommissioned, and Starfleet would seem like the organization not to break its own rules. Even if they were reduced to such a size, it wouldn't matter if they did. It seems very Starfleet to try to stay within the boundaries when that doesn't make any sense anymore. People also question the utilization of warp drive after the burn. Again, it is the best way to travel. Even if it's highly dangerous, you can't just stop using it. As an example, if gasoline in an instant became an explosive bomb in any active combustible engine, the mass devastation would be catastrophic. However, in the short term at least, gas is still the only real viable way to travel, so it would still have to be used even if it killed a lot of people in one instant. Again, at least on the short term. Another question that comes up is that of the Romulans, Borg, and other species that don't rely on warp drive. Before we get into that, I know that Memory Alpha states the Romulans have warp nacelles, and they try to make assumptions about how Romulan technology works. Fact is, the Next Generation, and even DS9 to some degree, goes out of its way to point out that the D'Deridex does not match Federation tech. While they may have nacelles, the way they attain warp drive is simply different. It's not a perfect analogy, but I would compare it to that of a gasoline engine versus a diesel one. They have similar parts, but ultimately, it's different how it moves forward. So it is possible that the Romulans were able to take extreme advantage of a defeated Federation, Klingon Empire, and others. They could, in theory, have gained most of the Alpha and Beta Quadrant. Just because it hasn't been addressed at this point doesn't mean that didn't happen, and doesn't mean it won't be addressed in the future. Honestly, I don't see why people get upset. We don't instantly have to be told everything. That's just silly. That said, we do know that other Romulan vessels utilize normal warp cores, or at least that's the way it appears. As an example, the shuttles or smaller scout ships appear to use warp cores. It was the Deredeck specifically, and possibly the Valdor, that utilized quantum singularity. So there is a chance that after the destruction of the Romulan Star Empire that we see in Star Trek Picard, the Romulans moved to using only warp cores, like the Federation. This would make sense, especially if Starfleet was focused on helping them, which means that when the burn happened, it hit them as well. Looking at other species, to be clear, this is a nightmare scenario if the Borg are still around. Borg do not use warp cores, we know for a fact. They don't even use the same kind of equipment. While Borg movements would be slow, they would ultimately own the universe unless another force stops them. There isn't a lot to go on to theorize why the dilithium went inert. My guess is that it's connected to that song. I think everything is connected to that song because they're building it up that way, but I can't really give you much more than that. And at the end of the day, there isn't a lot of reason to get upset about it. Not yet. It's not quote-unquote magic. At least until they tell us how it happened, then it may be. And it is possible that they could have a reasonable explanation. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to trust Discovery Season 3 to give me a reasonable explanation. Also, as I've stated, dilithium still existing and being used makes sense. They don't really have any other choice. The need to hate Discovery Season 3 for the sins of Season 1 and Season 2 is not wholly unreasonable. But for those who would sit in judgment, I'm going to ask you to do what Picard has asked us to do in The Next Generation, what he told us to do. If we're going to damn something, let's damn it for what it is. These are my thoughts at least. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.